Thank you, John.
Thank you, Lee.
Hey, thank you all. Well, I love that Doug holds this event on the Sunday before July 4th, where we celebrate our nation's freedom. So this is our freedom rally. Now, we hearken back to 1776, and three great men, Jefferson and Franklin and Adams, John Adams reading the McCullough book. Those people are the essence of freedom as we know it in America. They understood what freedom meant coming from countries or the children of immigrants from other countries where they had to flee to be free. These men were also part of a greater group of 55 to 60 gentlemen that sat down years later to give us a United States Constitution. And I love the quote from Ben Franklin when they finally had the final draft done and they had all signed off on it and they were all sending it to the states to be ratified. Ben Franklin walked out of the building in Philadelphia and a lady came up to him and said, Mr. Franklin, what type of government did you give us? And he said, Madam, we gave you a republic if you can keep it. I think we're here today because we want to keep our republic. And we know the forces that are against us now that want to eliminate the republic and centralize all power. So we're here to send a message that we're willing to stand up for our republic. And I thank you for being here to do that. If you look at what's occurring in Washington, D.C. today, you're seeing an erosion of our freedoms at the expense of empowering the federal government, of expanding the rules of the executive or the rights and powers of the executive branch especially. So whether it is drafting a bill by 3 or 4 political elites in the back room and shoving Obamacare down our throats at the dark of night, and then trying to adopt an environmental policy that didn't include the people but gave additional powers without Congress's involvement with the EPA to do a cap and trade bill because Congress refused to pass that bill. Even when they had 60 Democrats, they were smart enough to not pass the cap and trade bill. But now you see an administration that has completely gone rogue in the environmental protection agencies. And as one of our justices in a past wrote, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because it's not an exact quote, but this one's more fun, that now the EPA is regulating everything from farts to frisbees. And as Acela said, now the EPA feels like they have to spy on U.S. citizens by flying airplanes and videotaping feedlots and farmers and ranchers to see if maybe their cattle are exuding too much flatulence. And by the way, they will regulate that. Then we have on immigration policy. Well, the president wants amnesty, so what does he say? Almost every month he comes out with a new group that he tells immigration enforcement to stop enforcement. The law says, and the Constitution says, Congress passes laws, the executive branch enforces the laws. It doesn't tell the president he gets to pick and choose which one meets a certain political agenda to help him get elected and only enforce those or not enforce to their liking. So we need a new president that will talk about the Constitution and adhering to the Constitution and giving the rights back to Congress and the people who will stand up for a republic. Now, we're going to vote to repeal Obamacare in a week. I got to tell you that many of us were really hoping and thought that next week we would start a process of replacing Obamacare, because in our hearts we knew it was unconstitutional. We just didn't foresee that 5 members would say a clearly written civil penalty is actually a tax. I'm still trying to work through that concept. So we have to do the repeal. But the reality is, if we repeal next week, which we will pass that, it goes to Harry Reid in the Senate, where it will not see the light of day. And it's going to take the American public on November 6th to say, we want it repealed, and elect people that will say yes to repeal. Now, I do want to say one thing about what happens if we get to that point, because I think that's a valid question the other side asks. What will you do if it's repealed? Because we do need reform in our health care system. The issue with the bill that the president wrote with Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid was it didn't do what the American people wanted Congress to do, and that's go after the high cost of medical care that is creating a barrier to access. We wanted a lower price system, not one that removed the power from physicians and patients to bureaucrats in cold gray buildings in Washington, D.C. The bottom line is Washington, D.C. now has control over your health care and what the doctors do. We have one great example of it because the president, through this ACA and Catherine Sebelius, has now said, even if you have deeply based religious beliefs about abortion, we are going to force you to buy a policy that covers it. If you're an employer who has deeply seated religious beliefs against abortion or other birth issues, you have to provide a policy to your employers that covers those things that violate their conscience. They can't do that if we protect our republic, but they're doing it now. Then, one thing I want you guys to keep in mind. There is also, I would have to say there is one thing in that bill that does lower costs. Not the way you and I think. It's called the Individual or the Independent Patients Advisory Board, IPAD. And this is the board where they say, you know what? We think 75-year-olds shouldn't have heart surgery anymore. So there is a tool to ration health care by an unelected, non-medical based board. And that's wrong, and that's just one of the main reasons why we have to repeal this. So that's when some liberal comes up to you and says, there's nothing in that president's bill that says that the decisions are made in Washington, D.C., just say Catherine Sebelius and IPAB. Those are two major pieces of evidence that they can't counter. Besides the 189 new boards and divisions created in this bill. Anyway, I've gone way too long. But I wanted to be here to tell you that November is extremely important in the direction of this country if we believe in the power of the individual and the power of our states and the power of the republic. So let's work together and make sure that our country gets on the right track to prosperity and freedom. Thank you and bless you for being here today.